Welcome to the Rebuilt Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Sykes. Each week, I sit down with people who have faced life's toughest challenges and come out victorious, along with mental health experts, coaches, and leaders. We explore powerful stories of transformation, faith, and practical strategies for building a life of purpose and resilience. This is the Rebuilt Podcast. What's up, everyone? My name is Jason, and welcome to the Rebuilt Podcast. In today's episode, I got to sit down with a good friend of mine, Marquis Dennis. We got to go over what it means to be a father, and it came from a place of him not even knowing his own, how that shaped his life, and what he was able to do in response to it. He is now the director of an organization called Birthright Living Legacy, and it helps equip men to be true fathers. This episode is packed with great advice and good inspirational conversation. I'm so excited for you to listen to it. Let's go check it out. Hey, what's up, Marquis? How are you, man?
I am glorious, Jason. How are you?
Doing good. Man, brother, it is always so good to talk to you. I feel like you're one of the happiest people that I know, so I just love being around you, man.
Hey, same. I enjoy it as well, sir. Thank you for letting me be in your sphere today.
You have such wisdom that I know my listeners are going to get a lot out of because you've been through some stuff, and I think you've got a pretty good testimony. You're doing some crazy, amazing stuff in our community, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Well, hey, let's jump right in, my friend. Super
All
excited.
right. Well, let's just start with those who don't know you. Maybe just kind of introduce yourself and how you kind of got to where you're at now.
All right. So I am Marquis Dennis, founder and executive director of a wonderful nonprofit celebration and support on fathers, which is called Birthright Living Legacy, as you can see. And so we are a organization that was started just to be able to give men and fathers community because loneliness and it's just an epidemic that's torturing the hearts and souls of men all over. But then also fatherhood with that grand level of responsibility. There's a lot of individuals that didn't grow up with fathers or didn't know how well or not well that their fathers did. So they're trying to live their life based on an ideal that they have in their head, not knowing that those fathers that they're trying to model after solved all of their problems with a commercial break. And so we give you practical real world wisdom to be able to know what best practices are, but also take into account what it is that you and your partner are trying to accomplish with your parenting, but just being introspective on being the best version of you. So that way everyone else can be the best versions of themselves. As Jim Rohn always says, if you promise to work on you and I'll promise to work on me, then we'll both. And that's why I love what you're doing, because you're helping a lot of men and fathers and, probably women as well, to be able to take that introspection, figure out exactly what it does mean to be the best version of myself.
That's great, man. I love that. Yeah, I'm just trying to reach people because I feel like, when you really find who God is and you reach that level of identity that you feel you're created to be, you owe it to everyone else to make sure that they can find that as well. And I struggled so many years trying to find that. And I wish somebody would have just come alongside me and helped me with that. So love it, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit, let's go way back here. Let's talk about your childhood, if you will. Just tell me kind of what it was like in your family growing up, maybe your relationship with your father. Just kind of, enlighten us a little bit.
Sure. So I grew up in North Tulsa. For those that are not in the Tulsa area, it is the what you would consider the dilapidated area of life. Not a lot of economic mobility. A lot of rent houses, that whole thing, below the poverty line. So I grew up out there. Schools, single mother home. Didn't know my dad till I was about 14. So moved around a little bit, had some shaky things going on, lived in a high crime, high drug area, and just did everything I could to, realize that I was a kid having fun. It's funny that you don't really know that you're being traumatized or experiencing bad things when you're in them. You find out later, oh, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. One of my dads used to say it like this is, he was, he got taken in by DHS when he was young, and he did it because he went to his some kids in his class and said, "Hey, man, what kind of car do you guys sleep in?" And the teacher
Oh,
said,
wow.
"Wait, what?" But he thought that was normal. And so when you live in a high crime area as a child, in those kinds of drug infested places, you don't know that that's, not desirable. You think that that's just a normal part of life because everybody in your neighborhood has the same story. So I grew up there, then got the opportunity due to my mom having a little bit of a shakeup in her world. We moved out to Broken Arrow, which is definitely the stark opposite. Um, and when I transitioned from what was seemingly a minority community into a affluent all white community, I thought to myself, like, why is this life so different? And, with a kid with limited information, I thought that the race was all that there was to it. And really, it was because the families were intact in the communities that I was moving into. Because, even though they happened to look a certain way, they didn't all look the same way. There was
No.
Asians, there was Hispanics. It just was not a lot of people that looked like me. And so I thought, well, success and greatness must not be for me. I should only experience the life that has been given for me. And then I started to look at the TV programming. I started to hear the music. I started to see my surroundings before I got really involved and let God change my life. And so I bought into the lie, which was that, that was the only option for me is to live, that sort of life.
Yeah, man, I feel that's very common, especially in today's. I mean, even back then when you were going through it, but even today's generation with culture, it's just amazing how easily people are manipulated, especially when they don't know what their purpose is or have a good role model to show them a better way, you know?
Well, 100%. The key was you said manipulated. A lot of times people don't understand fathers are the ones that protect you from that. Manipulation is, it's deemed a bad thing, but sales is manipulation.
Mm.
Chiropractic is manipulation. So it's not that all manipulation is bad. What it is it's just saying if you are using my emotions, my feelings, and my heart to get me to do something that's going to negatively impact myself and others, that's when it becomes a bad thing. And so with fathers, we are the ones that are able to help protect from that. It's not to say that moms don't, but moms more often than not are able to see it at a different angle. And so that's why both parents are intrinsically valuable to a child. And this is why God created the village to be four grandparents, two parents, brothers, sisters, uncles, cousins, and neighbors. Because if you don't have that entire village setup, then you run into a little bit of a problem when it comes to your identity and trying to figure out who you are, what you're supposed to do, what stuff you adopt from others, and so on and so forth.
You're right. It is father's responsibility to do that. They are supposed to help us with that. And it is unfortunate that a lot of people have fathers that don't do that. In fact, they can become the problem, can't they?
It's possible. This is the thing that people have to remember. There are no such thing as toxic men traits. They just don't exist. They're called toxic traits. It doesn't matter who's getting abused. It's just got to be wrong. It doesn't matter who's getting lied to. It's just got to be wrong, because manipulation, again, is one of those things that sometimes unfairly get put on moms and women, because they are, oh, honey, I just really can't live, and you're just like, oh, let me go ahead and help. But it's manipulation, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not a negative thing, you know what I mean? And so when you're starting to look at it for what it is, one of my mentors, Dr. Miles Monroe, said, if a purpose of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. And so abuse just simply means abnormal use for what it was created. So when you have people, I mean, and this is a lot of what your job is to help people understand why they are living their life abusing themselves. It's like, hey, what were you created to do and why? And then once you figure that out, now you can be useful. I mean, it's no different than the cell phone. If I take this cell phone, an abnormal use for it would be to open the door. If I used it to prop my door open, it would work for that. But that was not what it was created for. This is no different than somebody that's supposed to be an author that's sitting at Amazon, packing up books, versus writing them. It's that kind of a thought process to think about is abuse has to be wrong no matter who's doing it. But those standards only exist in a civilized community. And without fathers, without mothers, without grandparents, without schools, small businesses, and churches, you don't have anything to build from. And that's slowly what this world is trying to eke out is they're trying to get rid of fathers, which then gets rid of the family, which then gets rid of enforcing the laws and the rules because women don't get a chance to enforce laws and rules because, I'm 6'4", I'm 300 pounds. There's not very many women that can enforce me to do something that doesn't require a gun, right? And so when we have this kind of a situation, if everybody knows what their place is and what they're supposed to do and why, it just makes for a happier society. I'm not trying to convince you be my gardener because you like flowers. It's like, no, you're in the position that God has you in. And that's where I get to benefit the most is when I have an opportunity to sit down and talk to you to help me.
Yeah, that's true. That's great. And I love your analogy over the cell phone. Um, I outlined something kind of a little close to that in my book, talking about knowing how to use your mind. And I'm a musician, so I use a guitar. And it's like, you can make some really bad music on a guitar. But if you actually understand the instrument, you can make some
Hmm.
really good music. So how are you using it?
Hmm.
Um, but no, I love this cell phone analogy. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people.
I use it a lot like cinnamon. So this is what I tell people is like, cinnamon itself is not bad, but Jason may not like cinnamon. I may love cinnamon, but it doesn't change the fact that cinnamon is just what it is. Everything is not for everyone. And like you said,
Right.
you can make beautiful music with a guitar, but you could also cause somebody to want to break it over your.
That's true, that's true. Well, that's good stuff. So kinda going back to your story, you grew up North Tulsa, didn't have the dad. What was that like kind of into your teenage years? What did that lead you to do?
So teenage years, man, just led me to act out in class, be crazy, class clown, enjoying the fruits of my labor, which was I thought, hey, I'm on a trajectory that they've already told me I'm going to either end up dead or in prison. And so, I was just trying to enjoy the ride as I could because I didn't see an opportunity for me to do anything else. That was just what the music said, it was what the TV said, it was what the news said. My teachers treated me this way, my community experienced these same things. And then one day I found out. I remember my middle school counselor pulling me in and said, hey, how about you never come back to school? If you never come back, we'll go ahead and just pass you to high school. And I was like, really? So, you say that to a kid that didn't want to even go to school anyway. And like, now you just granted wishes. I didn't know
Yeah,
God was real,
don't let my kids know that that's possible.
man, it was crazy. Like I skipped, like, it's funny. Like when I hear people say I skipped grades, it's like I did too, but not for a good reason. And
Oh
it's
gosh.
not very many people that have had the story that I have, but back then, it was almost impossible to, the truancy laws and all those kinds of things existed when I was a kid. So you couldn't just not be in school. So they had to give you documentation to let you be able to not be there. And they were like, man, if you could just never come back here. And I was like, oh, that'd be great. I would love to never come back here. How did you know? And so it worked out. But I got in a lot of trouble. I was only able to hang out with older people. hanging out with those older people that were in my particular purview at the time. These are gangsters, these are drug dealers, these are people that are doing horrible things, society wise. It wasn't like they're investment bankers sitting around and,
Yeah.
going over their books or trying to figure out how to get ready for the next SAT examination. I got guys that are, getting in fights and breaking legs and robbing people and all kinds of, and I didn't get too crazy because I still had a mom that was just not going to have it. So I was afraid of her more than I was, you know, seeing the police. So I stayed a little bit more shallow waters when I got into the craziness, but it still landed me in prison. I was in federal prison. Uh, I came out of high school in 2000. Um, Graduated from East Central here in Tulsa. Super excited about it. Um, but I got kicked out of school a lot. Even in high school, I got kicked out of school a lot. I got kicked out of Sapulpa. Then I went back to Tulsa Public and got kicked out of, Tulsa Public, and ended up going to, I didn't go to street school or any of that stuff. But it just was a weird situation. It was like my dad didn't want me, or at least that's the story I told myself. The schools don't want me because obviously I'm causing way too much trouble. My friends I couldn't really rely on because I was just always a weird guy. I was the guy that was trying to figure out, who am I supposed to be? My friends are not like me. I'm not like them. I only know my mom. So
Oh, wow.
why am I such a weird guy? Well, I got to meet my dad at 14 and I learned, oh, well, this is where that comes from. Oh, well, this is why I say and do these things, because he says and does these things. And you just don't know how close knit you are, even though you never knew each other. I didn't think the DNA passed along like that. So, again, as a teenager, I'm trying to wrestle with the idea that I'm meeting my father for the first time. I have this volatile situation of being kicked out of school, but also able to do whatever I want throughout the day while my mom was at work because she's trying to make a living for me and my sister. My sister was, out there doing her thing, but she was still good at making grades, so she didn't get in near as much trouble as I did. But I was running the streets. I'm at the mall in the middle of the day. I was
Yeah.
doing all kinds of nonsense. And so when I went through high school, when I finally graduated, I just was like, man, something's got to change. I got lucky and God got a hold of me, at this program that I was a part of called 180, going to church on the move. And, me and my friends would go there for all the wrong reasons. It was like a club
Yeah.
for kids. We thought they were bussing people in. We were like, this is wild. What are they
Yeah.
doing? And so then I started a discipleship course, man. And with that discipleship course, it gave me introspection and time to actually sit around and think about, like, what does it really look like to serve God for real?
Now, was
And
this
Mhm.
before or after prison?
Oh, this is long before. This is
Okay, this is
long.
while you're still a teenager.
Oh yeah, I'm still in high school when this is happening.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so when I moved around, my story is kind of like a Tarantino film. I have to, you know what I mean? It bounces all over the place. But when I was in high school and, I started going to the 180, we were also simultaneously, security guards at a club, so we would see the nightlife as well as the church life. And I was like, man, I'm tired of living both. This is
Mm,
insane. And so I decided to just jump all in on the church world. And man, I had an amazing time. I would be at the church because when I went to Sapulpa, I ended up only having to do half a day because the way my credits were set up and the way that their school was set up, I only had to be there half a day, which was awesome. And so I would leave and I would go to work during the day. But the days I didn't have to go to work, I would just go to the church and just sit there all day. I would just be there all day. That way I didn't get myself in trouble. Um, and it worked. It helped me for a while. And then had a little situation where I got church hurt and one of my leaders let me down and I just was not, me and him just had a falling out and it just never recovered itself. So I ended up leaving. Ooh, excuse me. Ended up leaving and, I said, hey, if this is the version of you want me to see and want me to be, I'll be it. And so I did. He was the man that was in my life that was speaking into my world. And unbeknownst to everyone else, he had made some comments to me that made me feel like, I was just so unworthy of being at his office and being in his space. I was like, all right, well, I'll just go be somewhere where somebody thinks I matter. Um,
Mm.
and I did, and it was a devastating couple of years. Me and ended up having my first child a little bit after that. This is at 20 years old. I was 19 when I got my first son pregnant, or first son on the way. 20 when he was born. He's 24 now, and so I went from there to having my daughter. Shortly thereafter, probably 2 years, 1 or 2 years later, then I went. Like I said, this is all like very, very early after graduating high school, and then it was with my second child where life got really bad, and I was trying to figure out how to survive, how to make money, and how to live, and I just was like, I know a way, and that's what landed me in federal prison.
Wow. So, you mind sharing that?
Sharing what? What landed me in prison?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. I mean, it's a part of my journey, man. I've learned
Yeah.
that the way that God works is He uses everything for our good. A
That's
lot of
right.
times people try to shy away from their testimony, but man, we're freed by that.
Yes.
And I was
Amen.
a young guy trying to figure out how to get by. I was, behind on child support, buried in debt because they take so much, and because I was not willing to be with the moms, and we just could not get along. It was two different moms for two different reasons. And I didn't know at the time that the only common thing was me. And so when I went to try to make some money, I was trying to, write a hot check to go to to decide to, pay my last month rent. And then because I had gotten into a car accident and I was a welder at the time and could not pay my bills. I was on medical leave longer than I was working at the place that I was at. Ended up getting in a car wreck. Um, and then so I was just trying to figure out how am I going to pay my bills. Next thing somebody gets this bright idea that they were going to help me out by calling a favor with a friend, for me to get some weed or marijuana or whatever you want to call it. And at the time I was like, oh, thank you. That's crazy, but I don't need that because even if I did, I can get it way cheaper. Let me call you back. And that's when I started the career. And so I got into it and I looked at it like it was starting a business. I went in and tried to figure out like what are the ins and outs, what are the things, because I've seen so many people do so many stupid things. I was just like, I don't want to be one of those. So I
Mm.
found a niche. I I stuck to that niche and I grew it. And I went from me being a guy that could barely move product, just starting out to, I had 25 employees all over the state and went from there to, I mean, and this is like within a year. I was buying from a guy, and then by the end of that year, he was buying from me. Um, and so that was how it went. I mean, I have been diligent in understanding that God created me to do something. I just didn't know what. And so I spent my life trying to figure out who was going to tell me. I thought that Jason was going to come and tell me that, hey man, because you're wearing a brown shirt, that means you're supposed to do something. Or the way that people taught me to serve God was always like either rubbing a genie or that he was going to come out and just one day be like, thus saith the Lord, son, you should drink our meat from now on. You know what I mean? I was like,
It's like Morgan Freeman's just gonna come give you
yeah,
direction, right?
I thought all these things were going to happen, but nobody ever told me. God sounded a lot like me. And
Yeah.
so when I was with my third child, that was when I was like, okay, something's wrong with me, um, because this is crazy. And I remember holding my third child, and I said, "Man, wouldn't it be great if I could be a father all the time, not just whenever she's not mad or when they're not dating someone, or when, like, what would it take for me to be able to be a present, involved, engaged dad?" Of course, I didn't use these words at the time, but that was the question, and that's when I heard the voice say, "Okay, well, what would that take?" And then so just when I tell you, like, projectile vomit of this idea of creating, operating a space where fathers could come and connect, and also, more importantly, connect with their kids and remove all the barriers that may exist. Like, if I was to flip this around, you'd see there's 2 guitars in here, a flute and a drum set, and a keyboard in here, just in this room alone. And then in the other rooms, there's all these other things that dads get to come here and connect. It doesn't mean that they're estranged from their children, but what if their kids want to play the drums? If your kid want to play the drum, your wife might be like, I don't want to hear that. But now there's a place to go that's not drum world where you can actually do that. And there's a small kids drum set in the other room so you can play together. But we're trying to build this idea that God gave me oh so many years ago, and how to correct the oversimplification of what fathers are. People have made fathers to be like accessories. Like, if I have one, it's okay, but he's not really needed. But that's the absolute, like, lie from the pit of hell. Because if you do not have fathers in your community, it's like running a business without having your CEO,
Yeah.
and it's just not gonna go well. It's not gonna go well. You can't run it without a CFO either. Or if you put both of those jobs on one person, you're gonna run into the problem. The people on the board level, the investors are not gonna be able to come run the day to day. But now you have your teachers or your kids or whoever your that's pushing your product, they're gonna be the ones that are running the show. Instead of you working on your business, you'll be working in it, and it will cause you all sorts of damage. And so it took me years to figure this out as I was, peddling my wares, which are very legal now. But
That's good.
I was trying to figure out how does one obtain value in this world, and I did, and I attained a lot of value in the criminal sense. But then I was like, man, what if I was to put my hand to the plow and actually create what it was that God created me to do, which was to speak, which was to teach, which was to share my wounds openly,
Hmm.
because there's so many people that live with the notion that they have to hide their testimony or they don't want to share and be open. I mean, imagine how many times somebody comes in and sits in your office and you're like, "So how can I help you?" And they're like, "I'm good."
Yeah.
Okay, well, what what are we supposed to do with
Yeah. I wouldn't I wouldn't even be in this situation if it wasn't for my past. I
Mhm.
thought forever, for years, that because of the things that I've been through, the shame that I had for what happened, the guilt that I might have had, I thought I was disqualified from ever being used by God. And it wasn't until God said, "No, you got that backwards. Because of what you've been through, you're gonna be able to empathize with other people where no one else understands." And that's when I was like, "Okay, I can actually use my past to further God's kingdom." And, I mean, you're exactly right. People just they feel like they have to hide it, and it's the exact opposite. In today's society, in today's generation, we need men to stand up and be vulnerable,
Yeah,
because vulnerability, that is strength.
it is. It is. I mean, and honestly, the thing about it is that, people say transparency so often, but transparency is just me telling you what I want you to know. But vulnerability is exposing myself to what could be a fault. It's just like 300. Everybody remembers the movie 300 when
Oh, yeah.
FELTs told him, "Hey man, you got a vulnerability over here." He's like, "So what? If they kill us, then we're lucky because then they have to face the entire Spartan army." And I thought to myself, man, what a different idea. And it's funny because I didn't use something so noble to come up with this idea. You know what I used to figure out that being vulnerable was the best way to operate?
What's
I
that?
call it I call it the M&M theory, because when I was watching 8 Mile one day, at the end of the movie, he's about to go on stage and, they're like, "Papa Doc's gonna say this and he's gonna do this and he's gonna do that." And I was just like, "Man, what is he gonna do?" And then he just went up there and just made the whole world understand, like, "Hey, these are true things about me. So what?" And then it was just like, "Oh, well." Now I got nothing to say. And he said, now tell these people something they don't know about me. And I,
Yeah.
wow, what a
It's
way to mic drop, you know?
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the enemy.
Yeah.
He tries to use this stuff to hold you back, but if you flip the switch on him and you're like, "Hey, you know what? So what? This happened, this happened, this happened. What else can you use?" He's got nothing.
Nothing. And that's
Nothing.
why, when, people say, you seem excited to have gone to prison. No, I mean, I said, if you were to talk to me and somebody I was locked up with, yeah, we would have you laughing. Like you would think that we had the time of our lives in there, but we hated it. It was awful. But I used to make myself write letters of how I actually felt. In my journal, I used to keep track of how I actually felt, the food I actually had to eat, the friends that I actually didn't have and couldn't trust. There was great times because I just refused to have a bad time no matter where I go. However, it didn't mean that it was something worth doing again, which is why I've never been back since because it's awful. It's an awful experience. However, it was super necessary for me to do it to do what I do today.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up your time in prison. How did God show up to you in prison? How did your relationship deepen while you were in there?
Yeah, well, so that was the first time I actually heard the voice and knew it. And
Okay.
so when I was there, I got into a little bit of an altercation with a guy. Fights happen all the time, but this one was a little bit different. So I ended up getting attacked uh, by my cellie over some nonsense. And we kind of went at it a little bit, and he tried to throw coffee on me, or I tried to throw coffee on him. He tried to beat me with a broom and just all this crazy stuff. Uh, and so he had a sock full of rocks, and he just tried to kill me. So it was a crazy ordeal. Um, and so with that, I ended up being on the track, which is where you spend a lot of your time when you're outside, walking around the track, man. And I thought I had some friends with me, and they did not think we were friends. So I ended up getting assaulted by a baseball bat. And, out on the field, we had a softball team, so we were able to do all that out there. But I mean, my celly just starts mollywhopping me with this baseball bat. And so as I'm trying to figure out life, I'm like, what is going on? Now, mind you, I'm having this whole conversation while this dude is hitting me with his bat. I'm just looking at him and I was like, wow, all right. Well, I guess we're fixing to get beat up with this bat. And then I looked over at my friends and I was like, wow, they really aren't going to help me. And so I said to them, and they're just kind of yelling at him. And I'm just looking and I was like, this is so crazy. And then, still to this day, I say it was an angel. It had to have been because he saw something that it just doesn't make sense for me. I'm on the ground getting beaten with a bat, and my mind just shifts to, all right, I'm going to have to kill this dude, apparently. And so next thing you know, his eyes get really big. And as his eyes get big, I stand up. And when I stand up, he says, he's kind of looking like he sees a ghost. And then he just takes off running. Well, I've been hit with a bat before, so I know that stuff could be broken and I just don't know it. So I start testing limbs to see like, am I in one piece? I'm fine. So I take one step, and I'm fine. I take another step, and I'm fine. So I was like, okay. So I start walking. Then I said, man, I'm gonna have to kill this dude. So I'm trying to make in my mind, is this it? Is this what I'm gonna do? And then next thing you know, this voice goes, I told you, do what I told you to do, or you will die here. So I stopped dead in my tracks. And I was like, now I know I didn't just say that. And he was like, no, I didn't bring you here to make friends. Do what I told you, or you will die here. And so I was like, whoa. And then he says, now go to your room and let it go. So I go back to my
Wow.
cell. Yeah, bro, I'm just freaking out because I'm like, wow, I just, got beaten by this bat. The whole yard is looking like they seen a ghost because they're like, wait a minute, how's this dude walking away? There's no way. He should be hurt. He should be broken. He should be dead. Something. I felt nothing. It was insane. And so go to my room, come back out, and they ended up calling me to go to I had to go to the medium prison to the FCI. And next thing you know, I'm like, all right. So I'm in there and I just, I just started fasting and praying. I fasted and prayed when I was in jail. when the whole thing started. And then I was like, this has got to be some kind of a sign, you know what I mean? And so I started fasting and praying, and then, I was getting really angry because I thought God was supposed to talk to me again. I was like, hey, bro, where you at? One burning bush. That's all I asked. Just give me one. I'll do whatever. And so, anyhow, I'm just asking and asking, and I get no answer. Well, then I turn on my radio because they give you like these clear radios that you have to pay extra for. So you're in there, you got nothing going on. So I turn on the radio. As soon as I turn it on, first thing says, so you know why I know why you think God doesn't talk to people anymore? And I was like, and he's like, because I think, my theory is it's impossible to please God without faith. And so he doesn't show his hand anymore because, if he does that, then what would you have faith in? And I was like, whoa. Well, then I turn it off because obviously I'm angry. I was like, this is not a Transformers movie. Don't be responding to me like Bumblebee. What's wrong with you? So then the voice says to me, now read Genesis, now read Numbers, now go back and see. And so I go back and this is the first time I actually took my blinders off and read the Bible like a book and not like a religious taught piece of material. And when I read through the book, I realized God has shown his hands multiple times. He showed his face multiple times and nobody cared at all. I mean, Adam was with God in the garden and the woman still convinced him to go against him. They're trying to they're tired of the children of Egypt, they get let go. They're getting bread fresh out of the ground every day and they're still mad. They're hitting rocks and getting water. They're getting, and they're just still like, well, I don't know. They're like, God, where's the meat? And then Arby's shows up. They get the beef, crows fly. And they still are like, nah, I don't know. Let me get this cow. Let me see if the cow will do it. And so that's where I started to realize is that I had been taught an Aladdin version of God. I was taught to believe that if I pray, I rub my lamp, and then here comes my three wishes. Well, that's not how a father works. A father works that I'm going to give you what's good for you. And it's not always good to you to get it in the time you want. My son asks me almost daily, can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? Well, yeah, you can have a snack if we're not about to eat dinner and if your snack is appropriate for what it is you're trying to do. You cannot have yogis for breakfast. You know what I mean? Like it's just sugary grapes. Like, no, we're not doing that. But we're also not going to, give you popcorn every time you ask. So it's being able to understand a father's role. And this is why what I do is so important. You cannot have a great relationship with the Father above if you didn't have one with your earthly father. Their representation is, what a father means to you. And if you get hurt by some man or some father on earth, well, you're going to see God through that lens. You may not want to, but you will. And then it'll make it really hard until you become a father. And then as you become a father, you go, oh, that's why, okay. And then you got some apologies to deal out. And then this starts to make sense. God starts to make a lot more sense because if you don't do it in the proper order, what ends up happening is you see God as an authoritarian that's got a lot of rules and regulations. But that's what a father's role is to make sure to enforce those things that are going to help you be the best version of yourself. Uh,
Yeah.
and child rearing, not always just in the rearing of the rearing ages.
Yeah, that's true. You brought up Genesis and the garden, and it's crazy how God our Father shows an example of what it's like to be a good earthly father just from the beginning. Um, when he first made us, I mean, we didn't earn anything. He just blessed it. He was so abundantly good. He wanted to have us experience that goodness. We didn't have to ask for it. He just gave it to us. And then, of course, we screwed it up. But then, you know, there's another opportunity. Hey, he's walking through the garden. He's like, hey, where are you? He knew where he was, but he wanted us to come to him and say, hey, we messed up. We messed up. Okay, you messed up. You come to me. Well, we're going to talk about it, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to fix it. And it's just so amazing how all through Scripture, God reveals what it's like to be a good father on earth as well. just love the way that God does that. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, Proverbs is, when I was talking to, and it's funny because in prison, a friend of mine, I was just like, man, I didn't have a dad. I didn't know. He said, you sure you do? He said, just read a Proverbs a day. And that's like
Yep.
getting wisdom from your dad. And I was like, what? And sure enough, it changed the way that I seen life from then on. And that's what I do is whenever I need fatherly advice, read a proverb.
So a couple of things that have happened in your life require forgiveness. And so I kind of wanted to get your idea on what forgiveness means as you as a person, but also as a father.
Well, that's a great question. So I'm a weirdo, and anytime somebody asks me something like that, I always like to look into the actual word because words have definitions, and a lot of times we only use our own interpretation instead of the actual definition. So the actual definition is the act of forgiving, forgive, the state of being forgiven, disposition and willingness to forgive, the origin being in forgiveliness. And so forgiveness to me just means that I have to act as if it didn't happen. Forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness is one of those things where you won't even know if it worked until you see the person. You don't even know if your heart is truly forgiven until you see the person. There's a lot of times that you think to yourself, "Oh man, I forgave that person. I don't care," and then you run into them, and then just anxiety and just stress and anguish come just rushing in, and you go, wait, but I thought I forgave that person. And so for me, I think forgiveness is something that you do in practice. And so forgiveness means to me that I have to do it in practice. If my son or daughters do something or say something that I have to forgive them for, I have to, me personally, I have to make a lesson out of it. Because if we don't make a lesson out of it, then I don't have anything to refer to when it's time for common language. And so when common language, like when my son makes mistakes and does things that are not supposed to be happening, what I get to then ask him is, are you making a good decision? Because with the decision that you're choosing, this is what's going to happen. You're going to knock this over, or you're going to spill that, or you're going to irritate mom, or irritate me, or whatever. My forgiveness is to say, hey, I understand, you got excited, you knocked it over, but next time let's make better decisions by doing XYZ. Because if I say, hey, you did this wrong, you're wrong for this, I'm really just programming them what to do the next time. And so forgiveness in action to me is simply being able to understand that I'm not perfect either. And so even though Jason may say something to hurt my feelings, or, you may do something that I feel slighted by, forgiveness says, hey, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then I'm going to bring it to him. I gotta if I don't let you know that this has happened, there's no way I can forgive you because I don't
Mhm.
have any understanding. Rarely have I said to someone, hey, this thing happened. You said or did this thing. It made me feel this type of way. And they were like, yeah, I know. I was hoping that was gonna happen. Outside of my
Yeah.
birthday, me explaining, "Hey, I feel loved and supported." My wife is like, "Well, duh, that's what was the point." But
That's
in
good.
real life, it doesn't happen in the negative space nearly as much as it does we think of those things. And so that's why I love in Matthew when it talks about bringing those pains and those hurts to one another. Like you have to bring it to the brother. And forgiveness is not just pretending like it didn't happen. Forgiveness to me is living it out by saying, hey, I forgive you, but hey, man, you know what? This is what hurt me and this is what you did. Because then I can understand, was this something that you did maliciously? Is this something you did on purpose? But at the same time, I have to know where my limits are because I'm just a human. I'm not perfect. And so, especially in fatherhood, spilling stuff, not listening, knocking things over, like that stuff is a part of parenting, but when you just cleaned up, it's not fun. When you just sat down for the first time, from the long day, you're not as forgiving. When your kid accidentally says something to you they heard somebody say in a store, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? So rushing to spanking is not always, the option if you even choose to spank at all. I learned from one of our mutual friends a really cool way to, to train kids in restaurants. I thought that was the most awesome thing I'd ever heard, making them do time out in the corner, in the middle of a restaurant. I was like, wow, you know, but those are kinds of things that, and then forgiveness is saying, hey, don't hold them to that standard and say, because they lied, they're now a liar. It's just saying, hey, they're in training, they're learning. And if they're afraid to tell the truth, who made them do that? It has to be on me. And if I look at it in the fatherhood aspect of, hey, what behaviors am I modeling that's causing these reactions? Then forgiveness becomes a lot easier because empathy is present. All these things are present, and my flaws are present.
What's one thing that your kids and your wife would say make you a really fun dad?
Man, so for me, like my son is, so we ride bikes. He loves to ride bikes. He loves to play outside. We have like a mousetrap little marble thing where you can build and send the marble on the thing. Like, so we do that. He loves Connect Four. We play a lot of Connect Four, but I'm a dad that, you're not going to win. Like, I don't care that you're four. Let me show you this lesson.
So you have an event coming up, don't you?
Woohoo! Yes, the Oklahoma Fatherhood Summit.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So the Oklahoma Fatherhood Summit is a statewide summit that we do. We used to do it every other year. Now we're doing it a little bit closer, and it's just really an opportunity for all of the fatherhood resources that are in the state to come together, be on display for fathers, for mothers, for caretakers. But also, more importantly, we bring in some hosts, some guys that are going to speak and then talk about some greatness. So we got this year we have Thomas Fainer, who is a father that, Christian believer. He was a dad that thought that all he had to do was, put a Bible verse on it and just love his kids. Well, his kids got old enough and started getting out there with friends and starting to lose his way. So he was like, well, what do I do to get my son back? And so he ended up writing a book based on the journey that he had. It's called Dad Lead. He had to put fatherhood down and pick up leadership and start to lead and model um, in more of a direct way what it looked like for him to win his son back. And then, how he did rites to passage, all that kind of stuff that he started to bake into his fatherhood. And then we have Dr. George James, who is our headliner, and he is incredible. And so he's going to come in and help you understand how to give yourself permission. Because that's one of the things, like I said, that I suffer with the most is giving myself permission to have fun, giving myself permission to enjoy. My wife had to come and kidnap me the other day. She was like, be outside your office in 4 minutes. And I was like, why? What's going on? She was like, don't worry about it. Just be outside. I got outside and she was like, we're going on a date. Apparently, he was able to take the boys to my mom's house, and so we went to the movies. Like, we haven't got to do the movies in, like, 3 years, and so, it was really fun. I went to go see Tron, which I would have never watched on any other day, but it was just because she grabbed me and it was spontaneous. We were spontaneous and we had a blast, but
Nice.
it's not something that's baked into what we do, and I'm working on giving myself permission to do that, but now she's gonna hear the message that I adopted of giving myself permission. This is what this bracelet is. And so now she will be able to, we'll have common language on what that really looks like in our household.
Good. So he's going to kind of explain about giving permission. What else is going to be at the event?
So we'll have breakout rooms, man. We'll have people from, like I said, all over the state. We'll have some young people talking about what does it look like for them this day and age. A lot of times we talk about creating programming or some kind of thing for young people to get them off the streets or to da 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 da. Da. Well, now we have some young people that are going to come and talk about what does it look like? How do you actually reach me? Because a lot of these programs are simply just glorified babysitters. They're not really actually, having any kind of impact so much as they're just giving you something to do, which is great. But unfortunately, those kids have to go home. And so that's where we're burning the candle on the other end to say, hey, let's get dad in shape, because dad getting mom in shape, or there's a million different programs for moms to get what they need. But now we're just doing wraparound all the way to say, hey, we want to see a family win. And so what does that really look like in 2026? And so getting a chance to talk to some of these kids, justice involved, so that way we can prevent a lot of that going on. But also there's, men's health with Dr. Chris McNeil. He's going to be talking about youth medical mentorship, and all these other kinds of different things that you may not even exist out there, of things that you can do to engage and enlighten your kiddos. If they're heavily into science and you don't have a science background, here's a whole group of parents that are really out there doing that, doing parent cafes and events. So it's just really a great way to get some resources as a dad, as a father. Like I said, moms are welcome. So we just really want to make sure that everybody knows that we're about to make something great happen, and we welcome it.
That's great. So that's Saturday, November 8th. I'll leave a link in our show notes. And then obviously I'll leave your information in the show notes as well. But if you want to shout it out real quick, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can call direct at 918-922-9445, or you can find us on any of the social media platforms. We're on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, all the things. But you can also personally find me on all those platforms as well. Marquis Dennis, or birthrightlivinglegacy.org. We would love to have you, love to talk to you, and see how we can best serve you and your family.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much, Marquis. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. It's been an
man.
honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed today's guest. And I just wanted to say that if this has made you think, if this has sparked something in you, maybe about your purpose or your relationship with God, I just want to encourage you to not let that moment pass. If you're ready to take that next step and connect with me personally, you can reach out to me through my email, which is jason@rebuiltlifecoach.com, or you can go to my website at www.rebuiltlifecoach.com. And if you're serious about building a stronger, faith-driven life, please go check out that program. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep walking in purpose and growing in faith. I'll catch you next time.